Basics of complex numbers. So a complex number is a number that has a real and then or an imaginary part. Okay, so we usually write numbers like this: a plus b I. Okay, where a is the real part and b is the imaginary coefficient. Okay, so like the square root of -1, that's what I is. When you try to take the square root of a negative, you can't do it with real numbers. You have to use an imaginary number. So adding an imaginary part makes it complex. So express the following in terms of I. So if you get the negative square root of 63, since you've worked with radicals before, this is the same thing as square root of 63 times the square root of -1, right? Because 63 times -1 makes negative 63. So in other words, this is square root of 63I. Okay? Let's see what else we got. Same thing for that one. Oh, you'd want to reduce it. I should have done that one, but you've practiced reducing radicals before, I'm sure. So this one is a little bit different. We also have this definition that I squared equals negative. I squared equals -1. Okay, and then you can look at the reasoning from I equals the square root of -1. Exponents have to come first. Okay, so to simplify, I equals 28. It's either going to be, look, you've got a bunch of I squareds there, right? You got I squared times I squared times I squared because the powers would add up. You do this 14 times, and you've got 28. So there's some ways of simplifying this. If we have I equals 1, I to the first power, then that's an imaginary number. I squared gives us -1. I to the third, now check this one out. This one's going to be -1I. Okay? Because I to the third is the same thing as I squared times I, right? Because I squared times I to the first, those powers would add up to make I to the third. So this is -I. So let's keep going with the list. I to the fourth. Now this one is going to be +1 because I to the fourth is just I squared times I squared. So it's just -1 times -1 that makes it +1. So you can see the loop happening again, right? I to the fifth is I because it's I to the fourth times I. I to the sixth, that's going to be -1. I to the seventh, that's going to be -1I. And then one more I to the eighth, that's going to be back to +1. So the loop keeps going. So basically, if you take I to the n power, and if you do n divided by 4, if the remainder is 1, then your answer is going to be I. If the remainder is 2, like this one, I squared, then the answer is -1. If you take the power, let's get rid of this. If you take the power and divide it by 4 and you get a remainder of 3, then it's going to be -1I. And then if you take the remainder and then if you take the power and divide it by 4 and you get a remainder of 0, okay, like 4 divided by 4 doesn't have a remainder, right? 8 divided by 4 doesn't have a remainder. You get 1. So 28 divided by 4 is 7. There's no remainder, right? So we should be saying that this is going to be +1.